Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We got our power rankings to talk about now. And Kent, I know that smirk over there. You're very proud of something you've done with your power rankings. Obviously, the YouTube viewers can see it. Why don't you announce to the podcast viewers what you have done with your power rankings this time after week 8?
I'm just taking the teams as what they are and I'm ranking them appropriately.
No,
So
no brand bias?
no brand bias whatsoever. This is not clickbait. This isn't me trying to win over a fan base or anything like that. I just, I'm watching the games and I'm understanding what's happening and a little shake up at the top, just a little one. And
Well, what's the
yeah, I
shakeup? Tell the podcast listeners what's the shakeup.
So I did bump up Indiana a couple spots to number one in the overall rankings, in my power rankings. And, you know, I guess if we're going to jump right into it, like, I just I can't argue against them anymore. I can't do it. It's getting exhausting to try to do this on Twitter. And like all week, everybody just kept saying like Indiana hasn't played anybody. Indiana has all year actually. Like skip the whole week. Like it's been all year. People have been saying that about Indiana, and this was supposed to be the game that Indiana comes back down to earth and like everyone realizes like, hey, they're not that great because they haven't played anybody. And they didn't, they went and blew Nebraska out today. And that has to stand for something at this point. They're 7-0. They've been blowing everybody out. I'm at the point now where I think that some of the lower teams that they blew out, like they could have won by more at this point because of what they just did to Nebraska. So I'm all in. I'm smoking the cigs. I'm Curtis Rourke for Heisman and all the good stuff about Indiana. I'm with it, man. I am never daunted. That's for sure. Ever.
I was gonna say you are now never daunted, Big Ten casual, never daunted casual, whatever you want to call it. So,
Never.
are you worried about the Curtis Rourke injury though? I mean, Curtis Rourke's been dealing. Went out in the at the end of the first half. Taven Jackson seemed to do okay, but I mean, are you nervous about Curtis Rourke having him number one there, or were you like, look, this team's even better without Curtis Rourke. I don't need him.
It doesn't to me it doesn't matter. Like if Cade McNamara was playing quarterback for Indiana with Kurt Signetti coaching, they would still be doing this. It's not the players, it's the program. You
There
know
you
what I'm
go.
saying?
There you go.
And it doesn't matter who's they're playing for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. I've been told. So um
Well,
yeah,
that
I'm
didn't
all in.
help
I'm all
Purdue.
in.
That
What's
didn't
up?
help Purdue on Friday night because Purdue had everybody was
They
named
had
one
them
of
on
the
both.
make.
Yeah, I
they,
know.
they should have not had any names on the back of their jersey at that
Which
point.
by the way, I don't want to kick Purdue while they're down, but I hate when teams do that. I
I do
cannot
too.
stand that. Like that's so stupid and it's such a try hard move to put like we're all playing for the same name. Like we already know what team you're on. Like and for them of all people to do it, it's like, oh god, this is such a bad spot to do that in. Uh anyways.
I don't feel bad kicking certain teams when they're down because I literally have teams in my mentions and in my DMs right now like telling me like make sure you put us as low as possible on your Big Ten rankings. Like I literally had a Rutgers fan in my mentions telling me rank us below Purdue at this point. It's like guys, you're still 4-3. Like Purdue's what 1-6 at this point. Can't rank you lower than that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so. I'm not going to do that to Rutgers just quite yet. And yes, Sonny is right. Kent did get bullied by the Never Daunted.
I
And
don't know though, because like all right, hear me out though, for real. Like neutral field, are you super confident that Indiana is losing to anybody right now? Like you can't be that confident.
well, that's my reasoning for not ranking Nebraska lower. Like I have Nebraska at seventh right now, still ahead of Michigan State, who just beat Iowa before we came on here, and below Wisconsin, who has been exceptional on defense the past 3 weeks. Like we're talking about this running game and Braden Locke and stuff like that. Like, yeah, they've scored a lot of points, but it's been this defense that's been exceptional, and the offensive line has been very good as well. But it's been this defense that's really carried them as far as they've come now. And like at this point, I can't look at a team and say this team is better than Nebraska right now because guess what? If Michigan State played Indiana, I think they'd get blown out. If Iowa played Indiana, I think they'd get blown out. Like there's a lot of teams right now that if they play Indiana, I'm picking them to be blown out. Like they have reached that like Oregon Ohio State status for me right now where it's like if you play them, you're getting blown out. And that's honestly why I ranked them above Penn State because Penn State is one of those teams that I'm like if you play them, you might make it close, but I feel very confident any of these teams like 6th or lower, if you play them, you're getting blown out by Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that and I do think that we should point out that like there's some clear separators that are starting to happen. Like, I think that like for us, it's pretty obvious that like clearly I have Indiana 1, so it's not going to be the same at the top right now. But those top 6 teams, like I think are starting to, rise to the top, if you will, like the cream always rises to the top. And I think that's what's starting to happen with those 6 teams. And then everything below that is such a jumbled mess of like everyone has beat up on each other throughout the year already. Even like in week 8, when we've only played like 4 or 5 conference games at this point, it's just been a bloodbath at the bottom of the conference. So it's really difficult, but I think that there's a clear separator between like where we have Wisconsin and like everybody else, I think. And
Yeah.
even at the bottom as well, like with some of the teams that we have at the bottom, I guess we kind of have a mix up. We'll go through it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and talk about my rankings really fast for the podcast listeners. Obviously, if you're on YouTube, you can see it, but I'll talk about mine really fast for the podcast listeners, and then Kent, you can kind of go through yours for a few minutes. I have Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2 still. I have Indiana number 3. I moved them up above Penn State, kind of like for the reasoning I gave earlier. I just feel that confident in Indiana right now that they're going to beat any team that they play in the Big Ten soundly. I don't feel the same way about Penn State. Unfortunately, they went to USC and yeah, they pulled that one out, but that was a game that early on Penn State was losing by 2 scores. And so
or even the Illinois game at home, like was close.
The
like
Illinois game,
the
I do give them a little bit more credit for that because Illinois is a good team. I have them
right.
5th, but even Illinois, like I think it was somebody earlier was saying Illinois should be higher. Like, yeah, that was a huge win against Michigan. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think that Illinois is a very good football team, but we're talking about 4 teams in front of them that are arguably all top 5 teams in the country right now. Like Illinois at 5th, they're like I tweeted it kind of joking earlier, but the more I thought about it and the more I see people playing, like I probably would rank Illinois top 10 at this point. Their only losses at Penn State during a whiteout atmosphere. I know it wasn't technically a whiteout, but like a whiteout atmosphere. So, I mean, for me, they're 5th on here, but they're top 10 in the country in my mind. And then after that, you have Wisconsin, Wisconsin's only losses this season is to USC on the road, which like, yeah, that wasn't great, but that was, I think, their first game with Braden Locke as the starting quarterback, and to Alabama, who, Alabama obviously is not as good as many people thought, but I think their pure athleticism is kind of what got them over the hump there with Wisconsin. And then I have Nebraska, similar reasons to what I said earlier, even though they got blown out. There's a lot of teams I think could get blown out right now. And then Michigan State. Look, Michigan State has only lost to Ohio State, Oregon, and Boston College. Like, Boston College obviously is not a top, 20 team or something like that, but 2 of your 3 losses are to Ohio State and Oregon. Like, there's not much more you can do about that. And they just beat Iowa with a super good game plan to beat Caleb Johnson. And, we can talk about how Brendan Sullivan should have been playing in that game. I think he should have. But it is what it is. That's what Kirk Ferentz decided to do. And then you have Iowa, Minnesota, Washington, Michigan. I don't have any confidence in Michigan right now, not with this offense. Like I was telling you before we came on, Kent, I legitimately feel bad for this Michigan like defense because they're doing everything they can to try and stop teams right now, but this Michigan offense just keeps turning the ball over, and it's like what are they supposed to do? Like they just keep going out there and trying to stop the team. The fact that they held Illinois to 21 points in this game with the field positioning that Illinois was getting and some of the stuff that they were doing, like it was astounding to me. And then Maryland, I put Maryland up above USC at 14th, right under USC. I have UCLA at 15th. Then I have Rutgers. Even though Rutgers is 4-3, this is not the Rutgers team that started the year. Like this is not by any means who we saw the first 4 games of the season with Rutgers. They're riddled with injuries right now. They're not playing good football. They're relying too much on their quarterback, who is not a difference maker, and it is what it is. And then I have Northwestern and Purdue. So, Kent, why don't you talk through yours right now?
Okay, I'll go the opposite way because of like some of the thoughts that I had on some of the same teams, but Purdue, and then I put Rutgers at 17. Um, Sad. Like, is the only way I can describe Rutgers right now because I was so in love with this team at the beginning of the year, and I'm just not, and obviously not anymore. They're not playing with that same heart that they had at the beginning of the season. It's really tough to see, and it's really rough to watch their games. But UCLA all the way up to 16 for me, USC 15, Maryland 14. I have Northwestern way up at 13 because, and again, I saw some comments on YouTube last week about how this is not like a results ranking, it's a power ranking. But Northwestern lost to Wisconsin today. I have Wisconsin way ahead of them, so like it's not like I'm crazy to put them at 13. And they did blow out. I feel like it was a blowout. It felt like a blowout last week against Maryland. Minnesota at 12. Michigan, I wanted to talk about because of what you said. How bad would they be if that defense wasn't playing well?
If
Like they'd be embarrassingly bad after a national championship, and then you have this offense. It's really, really tough look. I put Nebraska all the way down to 10. I kind of want to. I'll circle back on Nebraska, but then Washington at 9, Iowa at 8. I still think Iowa's a really good team, man. And the crazy thing is, I just started really coming around on them last week, where the weeks prior to that, I was kind of ranking them lower. And then the Washington win, I was like, oh man, this team's really good. And then what happened today? But then Michigan State was another one. Like you said exactly what I wanted to say. I have them at 7. Like they don't have any bad losses. Like Boston College is their worst loss, and that was on the road, and it was raining outside. I know people don't like to blame weather, but it was raining. And Aiden Childs is 19 years old. I don't know how many times he's played in the rain. So Wisconsin at 6, Illinois at 5, Penn State at 4, Ohio State at 3, 2 is Oregon, and of course, number 1 is your Indiana Hoosiers, ladies and gentlemen. I think I got it right. Like, I know the comments are telling me that I'm wrong right now and I'm crazy.
Well,
that's
here's
fine,
what I'll
though.
say. Everybody's saying Indiana hasn't beat anybody, and I get it. Like, if I was a Penn State fan, I would be very upset by these rankings as well right now. But I offer you the counter argument: who has Penn State beaten? Like West Virginia, Illinois. I know you beat Illinois at home, but that was still a close game, and that was still in a whiteout environment against the top 20 team right now. Now I think they're probably top 10, but still, like I just I look at this Indiana team. Like I said, Penn State has struggled against Bowling Green. Penn State, yes, they did beat Illinois, but at the same time, they did not beat UCLA by nearly as much as I feel like they should have. I know they didn't have Nick Singleton, and I know that's a big part of it, but I just I don't feel as confident in Penn State blowing certain teams out and doing things right now than other teams. And Penn State, I know it was on the road at USC. They should not have been that close of a game with USC. I'm sorry. And it took like a record-setting performance of Tyler Warren. So I know I get called a Penn State hater, and that's fine. Whatever. Call me a Penn State hater. But I think objectively speaking, if you're watching Indiana and Penn State right now, Indiana with Curtis Rourke, this could change if Curtis Rourke isn't the starting quarterback, but with Curtis Rourke, this Indiana team just looks like the better team right now. And I don't think Penn State has any super huge win on their resume to vault them over Indiana at this point. Illinois, you could argue. Like if you argue Illinois, I wouldn't take it all that far, but at the very least they are tied. Indiana, Penn State at the very least are tied right now.
I get that, but like even like I can okay, so if we're talking about those two games just specifically, like Penn State versus Illinois and then Indiana versus Nebraska, which happened today. Like so many people I felt like were kind of clinging to Nebraska like this is the wake-up call for Indiana. 56-7? That's the wake-up call? No. Like this team is legit. Like Penn State does not have a win. I don't care if it's against whoever it's against that made me go, holy crap, this team is really good. Like I can't believe they just did that. They have some good wins this year. Don't get me wrong. They're still undefeated. I love Penn State. I'm definitely not going to get called a Penn State hater. Maybe in the comments tonight, but I'm on record. Drew is my favorite quarterback. I'm on record saying multiple times this year and last year that I thought that they had the best running back room in the country, not the conference. I've said so many nice things. I picked them to win the conference last year. I didn't do it this year, but last year I picked them to win the whole conference. So I love Penn State. I refuse to be called a Penn State hater, but they just don't have that win, like you're saying, JR, that just like kind of made me sit back in my seat and go, wow, this team is so good. Like, they have some good wins, but nothing like what I saw from Indiana today. And one last thing about me putting Indiana number one. I know that my power rankings get like printed out and taken to the courthouse and people swear over them every week, but I'm just a guy on Twitter, and I think that Indiana's done enough this year that they deserve to be ranked in my fake rankings one time number one. Like, it's not going to hurt anybody. Everybody's going to be fine. I promise you. Everything's going to be okay.
Well, and we'll see. I mean, Indiana, they played Michigan, which is 12th in my 12th in my power rankings right now. So really shouldn't be that big of a deal. They also play Washington, who is 11th in my power rankings right now. But I mean, we'll see what happens against Ohio State. We'll see Penn State against Ohio State, and then we'll see what happens with Indiana against Ohio State. I know transitive property is not a thing, but if I'm watching those two games, I'm going to see who plays these two teams better. So it's going to be very interesting. At the end of the day, I think Penn State and Indiana are both playoff teams. Like, I was there for a while saying, like, okay, the Big Ten is only going to get 3 teams in the playoffs, but like last week or 2 weeks ago, Indiana changed my mind. I was like, this Indiana team is going to be the 4th team in the playoffs. Whether they're 11th, 10th, 9th, whatever, 5th, who cares? They're going to be in the playoffs if they keep winning at this rate and they only lose to Ohio State, which honestly, at this point, I think they're going to lose to Ohio State, but I was tweeting about it earlier. Ohio State's defense got burnt by Oregon quite a bit last game, and if Indiana's offense is able to do that against Ohio State, could be bad. And Indiana does a very good job of getting turnovers as well. In this game, you saw it against Nebraska. I know it's a freshman quarterback, but still, like, we'll see. I'm just saying it's not a gimme win for Ohio State like a lot of people were thinking.
No,
do I still favor Ohio State? Yes, but
yeah, like what you're saying, the great thing is we're going to find out. I'm trying to like keep up on all these comments that people are throwing in here right now. The Penn State guy, he just said, Kent, simple question. And I'm so glad he asked this, by the way. Do you think that Indiana would be Oregon or OSU right now on a neutral field? Okay, I'll be honest. I'm not sure. But the fact that I'm saying I'm not sure is enough for me to put them at number one this week because they've had the more impressive wins. They've been blowing everybody out. And I'm seriously not sure that they would lose that game. I think that they could beat both of them. I think that both of them should beat Indiana because they have, higher ranked recruits and overall better coaching. They should. More NIL money. They should be winning these games. Yeah. But does that mean that I think that Indiana would for sure lose those games? No. And like I said, that was enough for me to say, you know what, for this week, I'm going to put Indiana number one. I think that they deserve it this week.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. Like, if we wanted to go off like who has the more talented team and all this stuff, like these rankings would never change, honestly. Like, if we went off that, like a loss would hardly change things. Like, if you want to go get like a that's one of the whole things that I have a problem with Josh Pate's like power rating system, which, I'm not trying to dog Josh Pate here, but like that has SEC teams at the top every single time, and you're going to have Ohio State in the top 3 every single time. Even if Ohio State goes out and loses 3 games, they're still going to be in the top 3 or 5 the entire season, which for me is like, okay, that's probably true, but it's a whole lot more fun to look at who actually plays who, what wins happen, how much does people win by, stuff like that, margin of victory. Like, for me, it's a whole lot more fun to look at it this way. So I'm not saying you're wrong, Penn State guy, that Oregon and Ohio State would most likely beat Indiana on a neutral field. I think you're probably right, but like, it's just a whole lot more fun to look at it this way.
And like, you're not positive about that though. Like, at the beginning of the season, you would have said for sure that's going to be a loss. Like, you're not 100% positive about that. Like, I like to go back, and I know, again, we're not doing like a schedule rankings, but like Indiana versus Idaho, I'm comparing Oregon's schedule right now. Like, I think Indiana would blow Idaho out, and Oregon didn't do that.
Yeah.
So like, true. There's another comparison right there. Like, I actually do think that Indiana would have blown them out at home because they blew out everybody at home, lesser opponents. Oregon didn't. Ohio State did, but then they have a loss. So it's like,
You know what we need, Kent? A Big Ten playoffs.
ooh, that would be really fun.
Yeah,
That'd
the
be really fun.
traditionalists just hated that I said that right now. But let's be honest, like this is where the sport is trending to. At some point, you are going to have a Big Ten playoffs and an SEC playoffs, and it's going to be like the top 8 teams. It's basically going to be the NFL. You're going to have the top 8 teams play each other, get to the middle, and you'll have the Big Ten and the SEC play each other for the championship. I've been on record saying that for the past 2 or 3 years. Like that's where the sport is going right now. Which
That would be way more fun.
You'd lose a lot of the traditional aspects of it, and I think that would be difficult to get through. But like seeing this 12-team playoff, like if there was 12-team playoffs, Indiana would not be nearly as much talked about as they once were. Illinois wouldn't be talked about nearly as much as they once were.
True,
And
that's very
would be
true.
and people would be looking at Penn State and saying like, "Oh, same old Penn State. They're gonna have a weak schedule and yada yada." I think it's a whole lot more fun looking at it this way, to where now I'm talking about Penn State being like, "Well, what Penn State Penn State could have a home game in the playoffs. Like if they're the 8th seed or the 7th seed or even the 5th seed, like they're gonna have a home game in the playoffs. You're gonna have a whiteout in December against Tennessee, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, whoever it is. Like, give me that all day long. I would love to see that. And man, if we can get 5 Big Ten teams in these playoffs, you think about it: Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, Illinois. Like, if you could get that, dude,
I don't know if that's
so awesome.
Is that going to be possible with the way the schedule shakes out? Like someone's going to have 2 losses, right?
Well, yeah.
Like it would be tougher. Like, okay, so like if Penn State's going to make it, they're going to have to beat Ohio State probably. That would give Ohio State 2 losses.
So if Penn State beats Ohio State and Ohio State beats Indiana, no. So if Ohio State beats Penn State and then Ohio State also beats Indiana.
It's so early to be doing this.
I know, but they still only have 1 loss each. Like you have Oregon undefeated.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
1 loss Ohio State, 1 loss Indiana, 1 loss Penn State. And I forget who Illinois plays. I'll have to look it up. But
could you imagine a Florida State fan listening to this right now? Like 4 teams with 1 loss are going to get into the playoffs. This is ridiculous.
And they have 1 win right now.
I know, but from last year, you know what I meant.
I know. I'm just saying. Honestly, so Illinois plays Oregon. If Illinois beats Oregon, which is not, I don't think that's going to happen. Sorry, Sonny. But if at Oregon, if Illinois wins, you're looking at an Oregon team with 1 loss, an Illinois team, Indiana, Penn State, and Ohio State possibly all with 1 loss.
Please,
like, that would be
happen.
Insane.
Please, I'll be cheering for Illinois so hard in that game then, just for that scenario to be a possibility.
I don't want to know what the mental gymnastic, like the tiebreaker gymnastics are of if Penn State beats Illinois, but Illinois beats Oregon, but Oregon beats Ohio State, and Oregon beats Indiana, and then does Indiana get to the? Okay, I'm really rooting for Illinois.
I'm lost. I feel like we should. I feel like we didn't give enough love to some of these other teams, though. I was really happy to see you had Wisconsin in the same spot as me. Are you on the Badgers with me now?
Yeah. I got myself in a little bit of hot water with the Wisconsin fans last episode because I said that their offensive line was going to face a little bit of a test against Northwestern, which I don't think was wrong. I think Northwestern has a good defensive line. I just think that other areas of their team are not nearly as good, and they rose to the test, and they had a really good game. So for me, I looked at that was one of the biggest things in this game, and Wisconsin's offensive line was really good, and like I said, they have a really good defense. And so for me, like, I watched that game and I'm like, man, Wisconsin, who have they lost to? They lost to a USC team on the road, which granted is not a great loss now that we're seeing USC play the way they're playing, but then they also lost to Alabama. Like,
yeah,
Nebraska lost to Illinois and Indiana. I guess both those teams are better than Alabama. I think they are both better than Alabama. So you could say that like Nebraska deserves to be over Wisconsin, but Nebraska got blown out. Like it wasn't even close for that entire game, which I guess Wisconsin got blown out by Alabama too. So you can kind of go back and forth there. But yeah, that's
I don't know. Like I really like one of the things I was thinking about right before we started tonight was like how, like, no offense to USC fans at all, like, because I love that USC's in the Big Ten and they were really fun to watch and like cheer for and all that good stuff. But I really wish that Wisconsin did not blow that game, because then they're right up there in the mix with all these other 5 teams that we were just talking about. Like Their only loss would have been to Alabama, which like no one would hold against them. And
Mhm.
then it would have been they would be undefeated in the Big Ten, just like these other 5 teams, with the exception of Illinois, you know.
Yeah.
So I just wish they would have held on to that game, because then we have like another team that we're throwing into that mix of like potential playoff team and like who's going to actually make it to Indy this year. Like it would have just been fun to have one more team in there, even though I'm not getting greedy. Like I'm glad that we got 5 that are in the mix right now, I feel like, but I guess technically like Wisconsin is still in the mix because they only have the one loss in conference. Like they could still make the Big Ten championship. I mean, if we're talking about Illinois potentially making it, then I think that Wisconsin could too.
I think Wisconsin has way too hard of a schedule coming up. If
Their schedule is so tough, man. Like
I think they
looking at
have
it before the year.
Oregon, they
Okay, so their
have
next game is Penn State.
yeah, they have Penn State, Oregon, Iowa. I mean, it's still tough. It's not as tough of a game as it maybe once looked. Nebraska, kind of the same way. It's still a tough game. Maybe it's not as tough as it once looked. And then Minnesota, who it's, I mean, but both those games are at Iowa, at Nebraska, and then you get home Penn State, home Oregon. I mean, it's a pretty tough schedule to end the year for Wisconsin.
Yeah. That I think that I know you just mentioned them in passing, but like Minnesota for me was like the hardest team that I was looking at, and I was like, where am I putting these guys? Because like
Yeah, I honestly dropped with Minnesota. I didn't want to, but like I couldn't put Iowa under them.
I think I actually moved them up from last. I can't remember where I had them last week. I'll be honest. I'd have to pull it up, but like they're just so tough to figure out. Like the close game against Michigan, the USC win, like then they go like beat UCLA, or they already beat UCLA. It's like, but they didn't play this week, so I guess it's not really fun to talk about because they didn't have a game. So talk about them next week, I guess. We'll figure
Yeah,
more
we'll
out
talk
about
about
them.
them after they play.
Yeah.
What have you made of this Rutgers collapse, Kent?
Dude, I kind of mentioned it already, but like it just really brings me a lot of sadness because like
Yeah.
Rutgers is a team that like I there's like 4 or 5 teams that are like not my team, but I just cling to, especially when they're having good years. I kind of bandwagon with them and like just love to tweet about them. I love to promote their programs and like kind of see them up. Like I love to see those type of programs up. Northwestern's one of them, Rutgers is one of them. You know, there's a handful of teams like Minnesota, like I've done it for basketball, like not as much for football, but like I just love when Rutgers football is good. And the way that they were playing the first 4 games, it was just like, man, I love the way that this team plays. They run the ball hard. They play really solid defense. And I was like really getting on board with them. Like the Washington win was like they got outplayed in that game and they still found a way to win. And that's like so Rutgers. And then now 3 in a row, it's just like, guys, what is going on? Like against teams like they should. So I do have to apologize too, because last week I said Rutgers was going to win this game easily today. And obviously they did not. They lost outright. So I
I
was
mean, I
totally
think
wrong about that.
if they had everybody on their team, I
Yeah.
think they win. I don't know about easily, but I think they win if they had everybody. But man, did you see that injury report for Rutgers? Like
Yeah,
it's
man.
like
It's
half their
tough.
team.
But that's part of what's going to happen. I mean, maybe not that many guys, but like that's part of what's going to happen like throughout the course of a college football year anyways. But yeah, man, like I said, it like I just really got emotionally attached to them too much, I think, the first 4 games, and now I'm just really sad about them. I hate to see it. I really do hate to see it. I'm being sincere.
Yeah, I was one of the ones that was a little down on Rutgers just because they weren't winning by as much as I thought they
Yeah.
should have. And like, the early games, who was it? They played Akron and there was another MAC team. I think they played at the beginning where like they kind of let them hang around in the first half and then they kind of jumped ahead further in the second half. And I was like, I think you're a better team than this Rutgers. So I was a little down on them. Of course, the week they lose is when I jump them up to like 6th or 7th in my power rankings. But
Yeah.
I really do think if this Rutgers team didn't get as many injuries as they had, and I mean their offensive line, I think they have 2 guys out on the offensive line right now, if not more. And so, I mean, you look at all that, it's like, what are you gonna do? Like Rutgers is not a team that's built with depth to just keep playing and keep winning. This is a team that
Yeah.
has to remain healthy all season.
And Ethan was looking good too. Like I even talked about it, I think, after like the week 4 or 5, like
Oh, in
when
the
we were
first
doing the
4
power
games,
rankings.
yeah,
Yeah, I was like, man, he looks really comfortable in this offense, and then like just instantly just fell apart. And I hate
yeah.
it. I hate it for Kyle. Like he's such a great running back. Like I feel like he's
Well,
not getting as much attention that he should be getting at this point. But You
Yeah,
got to
he doesn't
win,
have.
man. You got to be on a winning team.
Yeah, he doesn't have the offensive line that he needs. And I said it. I think during their first loss or during their second loss, like I think Manis is not the type of quarterback who is going to bring you back from like 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 6,
No.
stuff like that. Like you have to stay on schedule to do that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, like he just he wasn't. They weren't able to do that because the offensive line injuries, and Kyle Monunga is great, but you can't put the entire offense on his shoulders. Samuel Brown helped, but then of course he got hurt this last time, so it sucks, but it is what it is. I'm much lower on Northwestern than you are. You have Northwestern all the way up at 13th, still ahead of Maryland. I have them down at 17th. I feel like the Maryland win was kind of a fluke. Like Maryland just kind of gave it up, and then I'm looking at this Maryland team now, and this Maryland team has beat, who was it? Virginia. They beat USC now. They beat a number of other teams, and so Northwestern, like, I don't know. Like I look at this team and like they just got blown out by Wisconsin. Like I don't think you can only score 3 points on two Big Ten opponents in Washington and Wisconsin, and me have you above, I don't know, 15th at best. What do you think?
Yeah, like I just said, I always like have a spot in my heart for Northwestern. So like all the rules that I apply to every other team and all the fairness that I use, every other team I should say, I just throw it out when I think about Northwestern because I love them so much. So they're ranked probably too high, I'll be honest. But in my defense, though, I don't know if there's a team behind them that wouldn't get beat by 20 by Wisconsin right now. Like Maryland played really well today, but like, are we really trusting Maryland against a Wisconsin team like that? Like what Northwestern just played today? Like USC, like we always think that they should be in games, but like, I don't know. Like they did beat Wisconsin, so I guess I can't really argue that one.
Yeah.
But like UCLA, Rutgers, Purdue, like I don't know. I have North. Listen, here's the thing. I have Northwestern ranked too high. That's the only thing I'm going to admit on this week's rankings. It's the only team that I put too high for sure. Everybody else, perfect, especially at the top. Perfect, nailed it, got it right. Northwestern, maybe a touch too high. I apologize.
Well, on YouTube, we did title this the most accurate Big Ten power rankings. So if we are man enough to admit the one area that we messed up on and we are biased on, I think we did a pretty good job.
And I'm sure people will like, they'll look at when people see my rankings. I think the first thing they're gonna think is Northwestern's a little too high right there. I think that's the first thing they're gonna think.
Maybe, but you never know. They might love Northwestern as well.
Maybe
they might be like, hey, so finally we got some recognition. Casual Big Ten, he loves us.
I do love I love Northwestern. I don't know what it is about them, man. I just love them.
Oh, I love it. All right. I see some people talking about Lincoln Riley and stuff like that. Yes.
I missed the whole thing. Like, what happened after the game?
They just asked him. They were like, "What's going on? Like, what can you do differently?" And he was like, "I don't know." That was his answer. Was like, "I don't know what we can do. I don't know what I can do." And it's like, wow, that's confident coming from your head coach. But his buyout is like, I don't know, like $90 million or something like that. I thought USC
so he
was
can say whatever he wants.
Yeah, like I thought USC was a private school or something, so you couldn't see their salary. I don't know. I've read that before in the past. I haven't looked up buyouts lately, but I plan on looking them up tomorrow because we're going to talk about hot seat tomorrow and what coaches are kind of on the hottest seat right now. So Lincoln Riley would definitely be mentioned. Ryan Walters would be mentioned. Based on the way Nebraska fans are reacting to my mentions right now, I think Matt Rule will be mentioned. They don't think he should be mentioned, but
Kurt Cignetti on the hot seat right now because Alabama's going to try to hire him next year.
I was going to say, what's that called when they're on the in danger of being hired away seat?
Yeah. I think it's still hot. Like,
look at this. Eric is saying Northwestern is perfect at 13th.
Okay. See, well, maybe this is the most accurate rankings.
There, Philip.
I mean, they did just beat Maryland. Like, that's something I would push back on yours though. Is like, how do you have Northwestern so far below a team they just beat like last week? That's something that someone would say to me if I posted that. They would be like, dude, Northwestern just beat Maryland last week. How do you have Maryland so far ahead of them? That's what they would say to me. I feel like that's how they sound when they type it too. Like, dude, what are you doing right there? That's what they sound like. So
making up voices in our heads for the Twitter
yeah,
comments. So for me and my power rankings, I do my absolute best to try and stick to like this team beat this team beat that team. I do my absolute best, but there are some wins and losses that like are just so out there that
yeah,
I can't really explain them, and I try to go back and be like, okay, this is a different team than they were then, and I realize that's not exactly an exact science, but for me that Maryland Northwestern game kind of fits on that level, kind of with the Northwestern USC game a little bit, similar to the Rutgers Washington game at this point.
yeah.
Those are
That
kind of
was the
like my
one I have too.
yeah, those are
Like,
kind of like my three games right now that I'm like these are such anomalies, but I also recognize that somebody else would probably say the same thing about Iowa Minnesota right now, or I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say more about them because they'll probably keep making them mad. But Illinois Penn State, like I don't know, something like that. Like so for me, I try my best, at least to the ones that just happened today. I try my best to stick by those. Like I put UCLA over Rutgers, I put Michigan State over Iowa, that kind of stuff. But sometimes, like if Purdue beat Oregon, it's impossible. I wouldn't be
yeah,
able to take care of that.
yeah. Like you can't just put yeah, you would not be able to put like, which I feel like a lot of people on Friday night, myself included, was like, like this could happen.
Yeah.
And then the game started. I was like, yeah, never mind. What
We
am I
talked
talking
about it
about?
on the show. We were like, could this happen? And I was like, I mean, spoiler makers, sure, but like Jeff Brom ain't walking through that door. Like this is still Ryan Walters. Like Jeff
Or
Brom
maybe
built
he is just to watch it. Like, oh
he,
yeah, this is awesome.
yeah, he probably cried and left in the second half, or the second quarter at that point. But yeah. So anyway, I think that's all we can get to with our rankings. I don't think there's really anywhere else we can go. We could talk about. I guess I don't think there's anybody else we can really talk about. I think we hit on all of
I don't
them.
think we
So
talked about Michigan State that much, but that's okay. Like, I just was really impressed with them today. And like you kind of mentioned it already, like not a lot of bad losses. Like not any bad losses. Like I said, Boston College, their worst loss.
yeah,
And then
I don't know where Boston
Ohio
College is
State and
at right now.
Oregon, which there was a funny tweet today. Like I think Lanning was complaining about having to travel so far on like 6 days rest or whatever, like
Yeah,
or between 6 days. And Michigan State had to do it like Ohio State and Oregon. They had to travel to both within 6 days,
yeah.
which I thought was hilarious that Lanning was complaining about that, but like never heard that from Michigan State. So yeah, I really liked watching Michigan State tonight. They looked like they had their stuff together. Like, I would not want to play them down the stretch. Like, if you're a team that's competing or a team that has playoff aspirations, like they're looking good. They're looking good. Which reminds me, I need to go back. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was like, this. I think it was during the Boston College game. Actually, I was like, this Michigan State team is better than you think, and everybody in the reply said, no, they're not. Every single person. So I need to go back and pull that tweet and be like, I actually got one right here. I think they are better than you think.
I was not pounding the table, but after the Boston College loss, I had a lot of people telling me Michigan State's no good and they're terrible, and I was like, guys, like I think they actually have a pretty good offensive line, which
Yeah.
they played Oregon and Penn State or Oregon and Ohio State both and didn't allow a sack against either of those teams, which I was like, that's pretty impressive. And then I said the defensive line was actually pretty good as well, and unfortunately they like I don't think it's the offensive line and the defensive line's fault when Aiden Child's just throwing balls directly to the other team or when Jack Velling
Yeah.
is fumbling within the 10-yard line. Like if I'm the offensive line, defensive line, like I'm watching this team and I'm having similar feelings to how Michigan's defense is feeling about Michigan's offense right now, where it's like, really, you guys, we just got you all the way down there. We just
Yeah.
helped you out and you're gonna do
Totally.
that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Good game from them tonight, though. Like, it was nice to see them. Like, I don't have anything against Iowa. Like I said, I just started liking Iowa last week and then they lost this week. So I didn't really care. And I actually have futures on both of them. I was realizing this week, I was like, I have Iowa to win 6 conference games, but I have Michigan State to win over 5 games total. So I was like, either way, like I'm going to be happy with this, whoever wins this game. But I just thought the way that Michigan State played tonight was really fun to watch.
yeah. Yeah, that was fun to watch, and honestly, at this point, Noah Kim could probably be number one in your power rankings, and I wouldn't argue with it. So, dude hit 5 field goals.
Jonathan,
Or
Jonathan,
Jonathan.
Noah
Noah
was the
Kim,
quarterback
he was a
last year.
quarterback. Yeah,
And
he
the only
wasn't doing
reason I know
anything.
that is because I went to tweet about him and I was just going to post a picture of him and I typed in Noah and he was like dropping back. And I was like, why is he dropping back at practice? And then I was like, oh, wait, that's the quarterback from last year. Oh, my
He had a
gosh.
sweet arm sleeve though. Noah Kim, where's he playing now?
Oh, yeah, dude.
He did have a sweet arm
Noah
sleeve,
Kim
but I don't know.
definitely looked the part for sure.
He looked like somebody who would be a good quarterback, and then he threw the ball, and you were like, no, he's not a good
Like
quarterback.
if you were playing playground football like before you knew and like him and Dylan Gabriel were right there and like some other quarterbacks like Jack Tuttle, even though he's tall, like you'd be like, oh yeah, dude, I'm taking this Noah Kim guy right here. He's about to lead me to playground glory
Yeah,
today.
I'd take him over Dylan Raiola just looking at him, but that'd be a mistake.
That would be a huge mistake. Or would it? Or would it based on today?
No, I think Dylan Raiola. I think he's better.
Okay.
Sonny has a very important question for you, Kent. He says, "How many conference games Illinois winning, Kent?" Well, currently they are 3-1 in the conference, and their final 5 games in the conference are Oregon, Minnesota, Michigan State, at Rutgers, at Northwestern. How many do you see them winning of those 5 games,
I have
Kent?
to
At
look at it with
Oregon.
my own eyes, which I can do as soon as I finish this sentence. And I don't know if Sonny's being serious or if he's still making fun of me about my preseason pick with Illinois, but we have
He
we
probably
have
is making fun of
cleared
you.
we have cleared the air with the preseason pick. So if he's still jabbing at me for that, then shame on you, Sonny. I mean, honestly, shame on you for still doing that. No, let's see. They got Oregon. I think they could win the rest of their games besides Oregon. And I'm not saying that they can't beat Oregon because I think that they can beat Oregon, but I wouldn't bet on Illinois in that game. But I think that I can comfortably say that I think they'll win the rest of them though. So what'd you say they're at right now? 4-1,
3-1.
3-1. So they'll win 4 more, so they'll be 7-2 in conference,
Wow.
which is really impressive. I feel like.
You think they win on the road at Northwestern?
Yes.
Okay. On the road at
Don't you?
Rutgers?
Well, it's at
Yes.
Wrigley Field. There's going to be more Illinois fans there,
Oh, yeah, it's true. I forgot that
like
one's in
way
Wrigley.
more. So
Yeah.
they basically have one more road. Or I mean, besides Oregon, which I like just said, I think they're going to lose that game. They have one more road game, and it's Rutgers, who is like falling apart right now. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, I could
Outside
see
of
them winning.
Oregon, probably the team they struggle with the most on this stretch. I mean, no disrespect to Minnesota by saying this, but I think Michigan State, if Michigan State doesn't turn it over, but Illinois is so good at getting turnovers that, like, I think Michigan State has the best chance. But at the end of the day, like, I feel like Aiden Child's going to throw like 3 picks in that game.
Maybe,
But
we'll see. Maybe he's figuring it out though.
maybe he will. Maybe he will. All right, everybody, that's the show, and I can tell it's getting very contentious in the comments right now. So I'll leave this for you all to go argue with each other more on Twitter. Please do it on my tweets because that helps engagement. So if you want to go argue somewhere, you can do that in my tweets. I really appreciate it. Kent, you have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I'm also going to recommend that people do it in your tweets because like it's enough in mine. Like I can already tell. I haven't even opened Twitter yet since we started, but I can already tell it's going to be toxic in the replies. So go to JR's tweets and do it instead.
Yeah, my mentions are Rutgers should be 18th and IU fans happy. Actually, there's like 3 replies, so never mind. A lot of likes though, 50 likes. So
Yeah.
all right, everybody. Thanks for watching the Big Ten Huddle Power Rankings episode tonight. We'll be back. Me and Zach will be back tomorrow night with a recap episode. In addition to recapping all the games, we're also going to get into some coaches' hot seat talk, and we'll also make fun of the SEC and how fraudulent they are. So if you enjoy some good SEC talk and how terrible they are, please come back because we'll make sure we deliver on that for you. So thanks, everybody, for being here. We appreciate it. Have a good one.